So in this brand new Django project, we got a bunch of Python files. For example, we got the manage.py file. That's a file which already contains quite a lot of Python code. And it's also a file where we won't change anything. You should not touch this file. I guess we did touch it with this blank line, but you should not change the logic in this file. Because this is a file which we will use from time to time throughout this course to run project-specific commands. We ran Django admin before to create this project. Now inside of this project, to do certain things like starting a development server or setting up a database for our project, for these things, we will later use this manage.py file because this file will give us access to some built-in Django commands which we can use in any Django project. So we should not touch or edit this file. Now the interesting folder for us, therefore, is this my page folder. This now contains a couple of py files. Init py is not too interesting to us. It's empty and we don't really need to change anything here. It only exists to mark this folder and all the files in there as a Python module, a Python package, so to say. This is not a Django exclusive concept, and if you're not sure what Python modules and packages are, you might want to look this up, but it doesn't really matter to us here, so we can safely ignore the init file at the moment. Now the ASGI-py file and the WSGI files, these files are also files which we won't really touch for the moment. They will become important later once we want to deploy our finished project onto a real server to expose it to the World Wide Web. For the moment, we don't need to do anything with these files. They will help us with serving our Python application in the end, and therefore these are important files which you of course also should not delete. You shouldn't delete any of these files, to be honest. Now we saw a bunch of files which don't matter. You might be asking yourself, where are the files that do matter? Where do we write our code? Well, for one, we're going to create a couple of files throughout this course, but two files which we also are allowed to edit are the settings.py and the urls.py files. Now, the settings file contains a bunch of global settings for this Django project. I will come back to this file from time to time when we need to tweak certain settings. In the end here, we can configure a lot of behaviors of our Django project, and we can fine-tune and tweak many aspects of Django with this file. Now, the great thing is that the default settings are quite okay, and therefore at the moment we don't need to change anything here, but we definitely will come back to this file from time to time to add more features or adjust certain behaviors. Now the urls.py file, that is an important file once we start adding more and more pages to our web application, so to say. Because here we'll have to register all those pages to make sure that they can be loaded for different URLs. But we're going to have a detailed look at this and at this URL and page concept in the next course section. But this is a file which we're definitely going to edit. And then, as I mentioned, we are also going to add our own custom files. But that is a rough overview over what we got here and why these different files matter. Now, last but not least, to conclude this course section here, I want to do two things. I want to start a development server, which allows us to preview the application we're working on. And I want to dive into one setup step, which we need for the next course section. Now let's start with the development server.